Tyson Foods processing plant in Indiana is now scheduled to shut down next year. The company says this is part of a broader effort to cut costs. Meanwhile, Tyson just opened a new facility to advance its automation and robotics in food production. The Tyson Manufacturing Automation Center was officially unveiled today in downtown Springdale. Yet across the United States, Tyson Foods is closing plants, leaving thousands of workers in limbo. One major cause: Trump's trade war. This wave of shutdowns is one of the biggest disruptions to America's food industry in years, and it may just be the beginning. It was supposed to be the great comeback story, America first, bringing jobs home, protecting the heartland. But by 2025, towns across Arkansas, Missouri, and Iowa have seen what that really looks like. Quiet factories, abandoned homes, and wiped-out paychecks, all in the name of efficiency. At the center of it all, Tyson Foods, the country's biggest meat processor. A company that once took pride in its Made in America label is now shutting down one plant after another, leaving families fighting to stay afloat. These closures were never part of the promise, but they've become the new reality. Let's start with the numbers. In just 2 years, Tyson has closed over a dozen meat processing plants, eliminating more than 5,000 jobs nationwide. In Perry, Iowa, 300 families woke up to a cold email plant closed, effective immediately. Workers who spent decades on the pork lines got a severance check and a link to a job training website. No notice, no plan. In Noel, Missouri, the entire local economy revolved around one Tyson chicken plant. Overnight, it was gone, leaving 500 people jobless in a town of just 2,000. And that was only the start. Trump promised that his tariffs would make companies like Tyson open more plants at home. The higher the tariff, the more they'll build in the U.S., he said from a Pennsylvania steel mill earlier this year. But honestly, the opposite happened. In 2025 alone, Trump imposed new 10% tariffs on all imports, doubled steel tariffs to 50%, and added extra duties on food, farm equipment, and packaging from Europe, China, and Mexico. Instead of boosting American manufacturing, these tariffs drove input costs through the roof. Tyson, which relies on cheap feed, steel, transportation, and packaging, saw its profit margins squeezed on all sides. Rather than bring production back to American soil, Tyson's board made a ruthless decision: close unprofitable plants, shift production to lower-cost states or countries, and cut wherever possible. The jobs Trump said would return, gone. And with every factory closure, another American town slid deeper into economic despair. Trump's protectionist policies ended up protecting no one on the factory floor, only corporate profits. In Dexter, Missouri, the closure of Tyson's poultry facility wiped out 683 jobs in a town of 8,000. It gutted our local economy overnight, said Dexter City Administrator David Wyman. We lost people, income, and hope. The ripple effect was devastating. Local grain suppliers lost their biggest customer. Independent chicken farmers saw their contracts abruptly canceled. 2 family diners and the hardware store closed within months. The school district slashed extracurricular programs as property tax revenue vanished. Multiply this story across Indiana, Kansas, Pennsylvania, and Arkansas, the very places Trump vowed to protect, and the outcome is clear. The communities counting on protection were blindsided instead. Tyson's closures didn't just kill jobs, they erased entire local economies. Businesses depending on Tyson's payroll dried up. Homes went unsold. Grocery stores reduced hours or shut down. Workers who voted for promises of prosperity were left staring at abandoned factories and foreclosure signs. In Perry, Iowa, the pork plant closure wasn't just an economic hit, it was a human crisis. Nearly 60% of the workforce were immigrants and refugees from Sudan, Eritrea, and Central America. They bought homes, paid taxes, sent their kids to school, and then it all vanished. With Tyson's exit, Perry lost over 20% of its total income. The local grocery store saw sales drop by half. School lunch programs struggled to find affordable protein. Churches and food banks scrambled to help the newly unemployed. Mayor Dirk Kavanaugh said, "They told us the plant was underperforming. But what does that mean for the hundreds of families who did their best every single day?" Corporate HQ had no answer. This story repeats across Tyson's supply chain. When a factory closes, workers lose income, but so do towns, businesses, and schools. The tax base collapses. Stores close. What's left is a ghost town surrounded by broken promises. This isn't bringing jobs home. Trump's economic team claimed tariffs would protect American industry. But by 2025, It's clear they've protected corporate profits while exposing small-town workers to harsh global market forces. While thousands of Tyson workers struggled to pay rent, Tyson's CEO, Donnie King, earned $12 million in 2024, almost 300 times what the average employee makes. At the same time, Tyson secured more than $250 million in federal subsidies meant to support agriculture. Add in supply chain support and disaster relief, and Tyson pocketed over $3 billion in government aid in less than 2 years, while closing plants and cutting jobs. In 2025, Tyson spent over $2 million lobbying Washington, targeting USDA, OSHA, and the Commerce Department. Their aim? To ease worker safety regulations, weaken environmental rules, and shield their bottom line from tariff fallout. As workers in Perry and Noel faced unemployment, Tyson's lobbyists were in D.C. negotiating tax breaks and trade exceptions for shareholders. Those boardroom deals offered no help to the communities left behind. Tyson's sudden exit stranded hundreds of small contract farmers with no one to buy their chickens, hogs, or cattle. In Missouri, poultry growers faced canceled contracts and barns full of birds they couldn't sell. Farmers like Sean Hinkle, who borrowed millions to build new chicken houses for Tyson, now face foreclosure. "Tyson left us holding the bag," Hinkle said. "They told us to build, then they shut the door." A 2025 Missouri independent investigation found dozens of farms in Missouri and Arkansas on the brink of repossession after Tyson's pullout. Some farmers dumped livestock at low prices. Others destroyed flocks they couldn't afford to feed. Local banks warned that lending on Tyson-backed poultry contracts was now too risky. Generations of farm families in the regions Trump promised to protect are watching their way of life collapse, all for corporate efficiency. Consumers paid the price, too. The 2025 Federal Reserve Manufacturing Report showed tariffs on steel, aluminum, and foreign goods pushed food production costs up by nearly 7% year over year. That means, higher prices for grocery store chicken, school lunches, and restaurant meals. In Kansas, schools cut meat portions because Tyson's wholesale prices were just too high. Cafeteria managers in Arkansas swapped in cheaper proteins or raised lunch prices on parents already struggling with inflation. In rural grocery stores, the impact was just as harsh. In Noel, Missouri, the only supermarket saw chicken sales fall by 40% after Tyson left. In Perry, Iowa, grocers had to scramble for out-of-state pork suppliers, raising prices. When supply chains break, small businesses just can't absorb the hit. They pass it on or go under. While Trump's trade war promised strong American factories feeding local communities, the reality was families paying more for less, all because tariffs made production more expensive and slower. Supporters of Trump's 2025 tariffs often highlight the steel industry as proof of success. New mills have opened in Pennsylvania and Ohio, bringing some steel workers back on the job, but even this win is, honestly, pretty precarious. Experts caution that U.S. steel prices are now 35% higher than global rates, making American products less competitive abroad. Automakers, appliance makers, and food companies like Tyson face a hard choice: hike prices and lose customers, or slash costs, often by cutting jobs. Tyson's recent plant closures are a direct consequence of these rising steel costs. Manufacturing groups, including the National Association of Manufacturers, have repeatedly urged the White House to relax tariffs to stabilize prices. But Trump refuses, insisting that protecting U.S. steel and aluminum is vital for national security. What he doesn't mention is that the very industries America is trying to defend now struggle to afford those materials. In reality, the tariffs have propped up a few big steel companies while hurting thousands of downstream businesses, like Tyson, and tens of thousands of workers who depend on them. Across Tyson towns like Perry, Iowa, Noel, Missouri, Dexter, Missouri, Corydon, Indiana, and North Little Rock, Arkansas, the pattern is the same. Tariffs drove costs up, Tyson's profits fell, and the board's answer was predictable: close plants, cut jobs, protect shareholders. These aren't isolated cases, they're part of a systematic pullback from America's heartland. The very regions Trump carried in 2016, 2020, and 2024 are now left with economic devastation instead of revival. To workers, farmers, and local leaders, it feels like betrayal. There's also the WARN Act, a federal law requiring companies to give 60 days notice before mass layoffs. Yet Tyson's closures often came much sooner, catching workers off guard. In Perry, employees heard rumors before any formal announcement. In Noel, the official notice came just weeks before the last shift, without any clear relocation plan. Union leaders accused Tyson of exploiting legal loopholes and using corporate speak to avoid their responsibilities, calling it a betrayal of American labor. Severance packages weren't large enough to sustain workers through the transition. Many had to choose between uprooting their families to chase the next Tyson job hundreds of miles away or staying in towns with no comparable employment. Some moved to Des Moines or Kansas City for warehouse work. Others turned to food banks and church programs to cover their mortgages, homes they could once afford on steady Tyson wages. For immigrant and refugee workers, the impact was especially harsh, leaving them with few job alternatives. The fallout extended beyond the factory gates. In Dexter, Missouri, the Tyson plant accounted for nearly a quarter of the town's economy. Its closure sent restaurant sales plunging by 50% overnight. Car dealerships lost financing as workers defaulted on loans. Churches saw more people seeking financial aid. A local gas station even shut down after losing business from Tyson truckers. When a giant like Tyson leaves, it doesn't just take jobs, it collapses the entire local economy. In Perry, the school district froze hiring and cut programs after losing property tax revenue from Tyson. Road repairs and downtown revitalization plans were shelved. Local shop owners watched their sales disappear. Meanwhile, while U.S. plants closed, Tyson expanded overseas. In 2024 and 2025, Tyson invested in new operations in Thailand, China, and the Netherlands, where labor is cheaper and tariffs lower. The company claimed it was following global demand, but to laid-off U.S. workers, it felt like betrayal. Trump's America First agenda aimed to curb globalization, but Tyson leaned into it harder. Even within the U.S., Tyson shifted production to states with lower costs, often moving jobs from unionized Midwestern plants to non-union facilities in the South with lower wages and weaker safety standards. Arkansas plants got new investments, while facilities in Iowa, Indiana, and Missouri shut down. Executives called this network optimization. Workers called it abandonment. Trump kept promising that tariffs would create jobs, telling crowds in Ohio and Pennsylvania that tariffs would stop foreign nations from stealing U.S. factories. But, the numbers tell a different story. Since 2023, Tyson has closed 8 U.S. plants, cutting over 5,000 jobs, and opened no new meatpacking plants in the U.S. Trump's tariffs didn't build new factories. They broke existing ones. Workers who believed his slogans were left unemployed. Economists have warned that tariffs alone can't revive U.S. manufacturing. A 2024 Federal Reserve study found that the first wave of Trump's tariffs from 2018 to 2020 cost the U.S. about 75,000 manufacturing jobs. Tariffs pushed prices up, squeezed profit margins, and made U.S. products less competitive overseas. Yet in 2025, Trump doubled down, hiking tariffs on steel, aluminum, agricultural imports, and finished goods from China and Mexico. The predictable result? Companies like Tyson cut jobs instead of building new facilities. For families in towns like Noel, Perry, and Dexter, the human toll was crushing. Mortgage defaults soared. Food bank visits tripled. Teachers reported students coming to school hungry as family incomes vanished. In Perry, local charities ran out of funds just weeks after the closure. In Dexter, crime rose, with more thefts and domestic disputes blamed on financial stress. Factory closures don't just show up on balance sheets, they leave broken families and shattered futures. Meanwhile, Tyson's leadership thrived. CEO Donnie King and top executives continued to collect millions in salaries, bonuses, and stock options. Tyson's stock rebounded by late 2025 as investors praised the company's cost-cutting strategies. Wall Street cheered Tyson's leaner structure, but on Main Street, it was a story of broken promises and economic ruin. Trump's tariff policy, often more political bluster than strategy, created what some economists called the taco approach: threat, announce, compromise, overturn. He'd threaten high tariffs, wait for backlash, then quietly scale them back. This yo-yo approach left businesses wary of investing. Tyson, facing volatile prices and unpredictable trade policies, chose to protect shareholders by cutting costs at home instead of betting on long-term U.S. growth. Other industries followed suit. Car makers delayed expansions, semiconductor plants paused construction, food processors consolidated, closing inefficient plants and focusing abroad. The story isn't over. As of mid-2025, Tyson is still reviewing the future of plants in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Analysts expect more closures if costs stay high and demand weakens. Trump's latest tariff threats against European meat could spark more trade retaliation, shrinking Tyson's foreign markets and putting more American jobs at risk. The cycle of tariffs, retaliation, and shutdowns isn't ending anytime soon. Other industries are watching and learning the same lesson. Protectionist policies that ignore economic realities end up doing more harm than good. And the ones paying the price? The families who can least afford it, left asking when their promised prosperity will ever arrive. If you found this video insightful, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.